I came home from the barn at dawn, boots crunching through December ice, and found Diane in the kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear. She turned it face down when I walked in, smiled like nothing in the world could crack. The house smelled like cinnamon rolls and fresh coffee. Her Sunday routine, the one that used to mean we had all day together. I poured a cup, burned my tongue on the first sip. Through the window, wind whistled through the barn slats, low and warning. She kissed my forehead, said she had to run into town, help an old friend with something. Didn't say which friend, didn't meet my eyes. At church that afternoon, Mrs. Hadley leaned close during the potluck, her voice barely a whisper over the organ's hum. Saw your wife at the Comfort Inn lounge yesterday, wasn't alone. That night, I found the receipt in Diane's coat pocket. December 18th, bar tab 147. Same day as the old friend. I smoothed it flat and put it in my desk drawer. Evidence, not accusation. The next morning, I set the receipt on the kitchen table between us. Diane was scrolling through her phone, steam rising from her tea in that bone china cup she'd brought from her old house, the one with roses painted on the rim. "What's this?" she asked, not looking up. "You tell me." She picked it up, barely glanced, set it back down. Her thumb kept moving across the screen. "Comfort Inn has a nice bar. I met someone for a drink." "The old friend?" "Yes." "Does the old friend have a name?" She looked at me then, eyes cool as the frost on the window. "Kyle. My ex. He's back in town. Wanted to catch up. We're adults, Warren. People can be civil." I sipped my coffee, tasted nothing. The furnace kicked on, rattling the vent covers. "You didn't mention it." I didn't think I had to narrate every conversation. She stood, rinsed her cup, set it in the drainer with a soft clink. He asked how I was. I told him. That's all. She kissed my forehead like I was a child who'd asked too many questions, grabbed her coat, and left for one of her city planning alumni meetings. 3-hour drive, overnight stay. Third one this month. I sat there listening to her car fade down the gravel drive, then walked to the barn. Gabe was already there, pumping grease into the old tractor's joints, his breath clouding in the cold air. He didn't look up when I came in, just kept working, the grease gun hissing with each pump. "Everything all right?" he asked after a while. "Fine." He nodded, pulled out his tobacco pouch, started rolling a cigarette on the tailgate. His hands were steady, practiced. "You look like a man doing math in his head. Just thinking about the loan. That due soon?" "April 15th. He lit the cigarette, smoke mixing with the diesel exhaust hanging in the frozen air. "Bank still want both signatures?" "Yeah." He took a drag, squinted at me through the smoke. "She gonna sign?" Said she would. Said. He flicked ash onto the concrete. There's a word that don't cost nothing. Later that week, I sat across from Lila Morgan at First National Bank. She'd been handling our accounts for 20 years, inherited the job from her mentor when he retired. She was Clara's niece, my first wife's sister's daughter, and she had Clara's eyes, that same careful way of looking at people like she was reading more than they were saying. She slid the refinancing packet across the desk, wood polish smell thick in the small office. Her lavender lotion cut through it when she leaned forward. "April 15th deadline," she said, tapping the signature line. "Both of you need to sign by then, or the rate jumps 2 points." "I know." "You talked to Diane about it?" "She knows." Lila pulled out another document, older, the paper yellowed at the edges. "I was going through the deed records for the appraisal. Wanted to ask you about something." And she pointed to a signature near the bottom, dated 2 years back, an amendment adding Diane's name to the property title. I stared at it. The signature looked like mine. Same slant, same loops, but I had no memory of signing it. None at all. "That's your hand, right?" Lila asked, her pen tapping against the desk. My mouth went dry. Should be, or is?" I looked closer. The loops were too round, the pressure too even. I always pressed harder on the downstrokes, a habit from years of writing in field notebooks with cheap pens. This signature was smooth, practiced, perfect. "I don't remember signing this," I said. Lila leaned back, her chair creaking. Outside her window, someone's car door slammed. "You might want to look into that, because if that's not your signature, we've got a problem. And if Diane's name is on the deed under false pretenses..." She didn't finish the sentence, just looked at me with those eyes that saw everything. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you should review your paperwork carefully. Make sure everything's in order before April." She closed the file, handed me a copy of the amendment. "For your records." I folded it, slipped it into my coat pocket next to the hotel receipt. The file was getting thicker. "One more thing," Lila said as I stood to leave. "You given any thought to estate planning? Updating your will? That kind of thing?" "Not really." "Why?" She shrugged, smiled in a way that didn't reach her eyes. "Just good to have everything documented. You know, in case." I walked out into the cold, her words following me like smoke. The feed store smelled like cracked corn and road salt, the kind of smell that stuck to your coat for hours. I needed 50-pound bags of mineral supplement for the cattle. But when I walked in, the conversation at the counter stopped like someone had cut a wire. Two men I'd known for 30 years, Bill Hutchins and Ray Porter, stood there with coffee cups, both suddenly very interested in the invoice pad on the counter. The silence hung thick as the dust motes floating in the light from the front window. I nodded, moved past them toward the supplement aisle. Behind me, Ray's voice came low, but not low enough. Heard Diane's been spending time with that developer fella, Kyle something. Brennan, Bill said. The one buying up parcels for that subdivision project? Yeah, saw him at the diner last week. Looked pretty cozy. Well, can't blame her. Warren's a good man, but he's married to that dirt out there. Some women want more than a museum tour of the past, and I stood there holding a bag of supplement, the rough burlap scratching my palm, my neck flushed hot despite the cold air leaking through the door seams. I set the bag down, walked past them without the grain, and pushed out into the December wind. Gabe was leaning against my truck when I came out, rolling a cigarette with those steady hands. He didn't say a word, just handed it to me, lit it, and we stood there smoking while the wind cut through our coats. You hear that? I asked. Enough. A whole town's talking. He took a drag, exhaled slow. Town always talks. Question is what you're going to do about it. I didn't have an answer, so I just smoked and watched the gray sky promise snow. That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Mr. Hollis, this is Kyle Brennan. The voice was smooth, confident, the kind of voice that sold things for a living. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I walked to the window, looked out at the Northeast 40, where my grandfather had planted his first crop in 1947. What can I do for you? Well, I wanted to reach out directly, man to man. Diane mentioned you folks might be open to considering some options for that back 80 acres. The parcel along County Road 12. My hand tightened on the phone. Diane mentioned that? Yes, sir. I know it's family land, and I respect that, but I'm prepared to make a very generous offer. Development's coming to this area whether we like it or not, and I'd hate to see you miss an opportunity to cash in on. I never said I was selling. A pause. Oh, and Diane gave me the impression you were at least open to discussion. Diane gave you the wrong impression. I see. Well, if you change your mind, the offer stands. I'm talking about life-changing money here, Mr. Hollis, the kind that could set you and Diane up very comfortably, maybe somewhere warmer, if you know what I mean. I know exactly what you mean. I hung up. I sat there staring at the phone, then at the fields beyond the window, the land my father worked, the land his father cleared, the land Kyle Brennan wanted to pave over for cookie-cutter houses in a strip mall. When Diane came home that evening, I was at the kitchen table with the deed amendment and the hotel receipt laid out like cards in a poker hand. She set her bag down, saw the documents, and her face went carefully neutral. We need to talk about those? Kyle called me today. Oh. She moved to the counter, started making tea, even though she'd just walked in. The kettle hissed as she filled it. He mentioned he might reach out. You told him I was considering selling the back 80. I said we might be open to options. That's different. No, it's not. I kept my voice level, flat. And when were you planning to mention this to me? She turned, leaned against the counter. I was waiting for the right time. He made a very compelling case, Warren. We could retire. Actually retire. Not just this. She gestured at the kitchen, the house, everything beyond it. We could have a life. We have a life. You have a museum. I have a prison. Her voice cracked, just slightly. Kyle's offering us a future. Real money. Freedom. You're offering me dirt and memories of a woman who's been dead 15 years. The kettle started to whistle. She didn't move to turn it off. The refinancing papers, as I said. I need you to sign them by February 28th, or we lose the better rate. I'll sign them when you agree to at least meet with Kyle. Hear his offer. That's not how this works. Then I guess we're at an impasse. She poured her tea, the steam rising between us like a wall. He's offering us security, Warren, something you've never been able to give me. A life that isn't about dead people and frozen ground. She picked up her cup, walked past me toward the bedroom. At the doorway, she stopped. I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to save us. But you have to meet me halfway. So halfway to what? Selling my family's legacy to a man who wants to pave it? To a man who sees its value. There's a difference. She went to bed. I sat there listening to the wind rattle the window frames. The house creaking around me like it was trying to tell me something I already knew. The legal door had just shut. She wouldn't sign unless I sold. And without her signature, the loan would cost me an extra $40,000 in interest over 10 years. I pulled out my phone, started researching divorce attorneys, then I stopped, set it down, and just sat there in the dark, doing the math in my head. Some decisions you can't rush, some you can't avoid. The next morning, I found Gabe in the barn working on the tractor's hydraulics. The lines had frozen overnight, and he was bleeding the system, his breath clouding in the cold. The smell of hydraulic fluid cut through the diesel exhaust, sharp and chemical. I grabbed the toolbox, handed him the wrench he needed before he asked for it. We worked in silence for a while. The only sounds the clink of metal and the wind howling through the gaps in the siding. "She won't sign the loan papers," I said finally. Gabe didn't look up, just kept working. Unless I sell 80 acres to her ex-boyfriend." He paused, wrench halfway to the fitting, then continued loosening the bleeder valve. Fluid dripped into the pan below. "That's what I figured." "You knew?" "I've seen this before. Men lose land faster than crops fail." He wiped his hands on a rag, pulled out his tobacco pouch. "Usually starts with a woman who wants pavement under her feet instead of dirt." He rolled the cigarette slowly, deliberately. His hands were steadier than mine had been in days. When he lit it, the smoke drifted up toward the rafters where barn swallows had nested last spring. "What did you do?" I asked. "When you saw it before?" "Wasn't my land to save. But if it was?" He took a drag, squinted at me through the smoke. "I'd figure out what I could control and what I couldn't. Then I'd act on the first and stop worrying about the second." He pulled a small cedar stick from his pocket, one he'd been whittling. The shavings were fine, precise. He'd been working on it for days, the same piece, never finishing it. Just working it down, thinking. He pocketed the stick like he'd made a decision I didn't know about yet, handed me the cigarette, and went back to the hydraulics. That afternoon, I sat at my desk in the small office off the kitchen. The computer hummed, old and slow, taking its time loading the browser. Outside the window, gray clouds promised more snow. I typed Branson, Missouri cabin rental into the search bar. Our 8th anniversary was coming up in February, Valentine's weekend. I'd been thinking about it for weeks, planning something special. Diane used to love the lake, back when we first got married. Said the water made her feel free. I found a place, 2-bedroom cabin with a fireplace right on the water. A pier where you could sit and watch the sunset. Available February 14th through 18th, 4 nights. The photos showed a quiet place, far from town gossip and hotel receipts and men who wanted to pave my grandfather's fields. The price made me wince, but I clicked book anyway. Entered my credit card information, hit confirm. The confirmation email arrived with a soft ping. I printed it, folded it, and slipped it into my wallet. A small victory, a reclaimed piece of something that used to be ours. When Diane came home that evening, I was at the stove making chili. The kitchen smelled like cumin and browning meat, warm against the cold seeping through the window glass. "Smells good," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "It'll be ready in 20. She poured herself a glass of wine, stood at the counter scrolling through her phone. That had become her default position. Phone in hand, half present, waiting for something I couldn't give her. "I did something today," I said, stirring the pot. "Oh?" "Booked us a cabin for our anniversary. February 14th through 18th. Branson, on the lake." Her thumb stopped moving. 4 nights? "Yeah, fireplace, pier, quiet. Just us." I kept my voice light, hopeful even. "Thought we could use the time away, really talk, figure some things out." She set her phone down, but her hand stayed near it. That's really sweet, Warren. But that's a long time, with my schedule and everything. It's our anniversary. I know, Can we talk about it later? I need to think about what I've got going on." What you've got going on is our marriage." I turned off the burner, faced her. 4 days. That's all I'm asking. 4 days away from here, from Kyle, from all of this. Just you and me. She picked up her wine, took a slow sip. "You're asking for 4 days, but you won't give me one conversation about the land?" "That's different." Is it?" She set the glass down harder than necessary. "You want me to commit to a vacation, but you won't commit to our future." "This land is our future." "No, Warren, this land is your past, and you're so busy protecting it, you can't see that you're losing everything else." She walked past me toward the bedroom. At the doorway, she stopped, turned back. "I'll think about this cabin, but I can't promise anything right now." I watched her go, heard the bedroom door close. Not quite a slam, but not gentle either. The chili bubbled on the stove, but I'd lost my appetite. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Diane's breathing beside me. She was turned away, curled on her side, the space between us wider than the mattress should allow. My phone sat on the nightstand, dark and silent. Hers buzzed twice, soft vibrations against wood. She didn't reach for it, but I heard her breath change. She was awake too. I thought about the cabin reservation in my wallet, the deed amendment in my desk drawer, the hotel receipt filed next to it, the signature that wasn't quite mine. Lila's question about estate planning. Gabe's words echoed, figure out what I could control. I couldn't control Diane's feelings. Couldn't control Kyle's ambitions. Couldn't control town gossip or Winter's grip on the hydraulic lines. But I could control where I went and who I went with. I could control my own schedule, my own decisions. I could go to that cabin whether Diane came or not. The thought settled over me like the first thaw after a hard freeze. Surprising, a little frightening, but undeniably right. Diane's phone buzzed again. She still didn't reach for it. I closed my eyes and started making a list in my head. Things I could control. Things I would do alone if I had to. The space between us grew a little wider. Valentine's morning came cold and clear, sunlight breaking through the frost on the bedroom window in sharp lines. I woke early, made coffee, and pulled the printed cabin itinerary from my wallet. Set it on the kitchen table next to Diane's placemat. She came out 20 minutes later in her robe, hair pulled back, that careful morning face she wore now. Neutral. Prepared for whatever came next, she saw the paper, picked it up, read it standing. Today, through the 18th, 4 days like I said. Warren, the cabin's paid for. Non-refundable. I'm going. I poured her coffee, slid it across the counter. You're welcome to come, but I'm leaving at 10 either way. She set the itinerary down, wrapped her hands around the mug. Steam rose between us, smelling like the French roast she preferred, not my usual plain drip. A concession I'd made, years ago, back when concessions still felt like love. Kyle's hosting a developers mixer this weekend, she said. In Des Moines. It's a networking opportunity. Important people. Could lead to consulting work for me, maybe. It's our anniversary. I know, and I appreciate you booking the cabin, I do. But this event could actually lead somewhere. Open doors. She met my eyes finally. Real doors, Warren, not just memories and dirt. I stood there feeling the words settle like sediment. Kyle's event, our anniversary. She'd already made her choice, was just waiting for permission to take it. You don't need the details, I said quietly. She blinked. What? You told me that. When you met Kyle at the Comfort Inn, when you spent 3 hours at lunch last week, when you come home late smelling like bourbon in his cologne, I picked up the itinerary, folded it back into my wallet. You don't need the details. So I won't need yours either. That's not fair. I'm going to Branson, alone. You're going to Des Moines with your ex-boyfriend. We both made choices. I grabbed my coat from the hook. I'll be back Monday. Handle whatever you need to handle. You're being childish. I'm being clear. I walked to the door, stopped with my hand on the knob. The loan papers are on my desk. If you decide our marriage is worth signing, they'll be there when I get back. I didn't wait for her answer, just walked out into the cold, loaded my truck, and drove. The cabin was exactly what the photos promised. Small, clean, perched at the edge of the lake with a pier stretching into water so still it looked like dark glass. I unloaded my bag, built a fire in the stone fireplace, and sat in the silence that felt louder than any argument. The second bedroom stood empty, door open like a question. That first night, I made myself a steak on the cabin's small grill, ate it at the table, set for one, and watched the sun set through the western windows. Orange and pink bleeding into purple, the kind of sunset Diane used to photograph back when she still looked at beauty instead of her phone. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and framed the shot. Empty chair across from me. 2 plates, 1 untouched. The sunset behind it all, indifferent and perfect. I took the photo, studied it. The empty chair said everything I couldn't find words for. Then I opened social media, something I rarely used, hadn't posted on in months, and uploaded it. Added a caption, reserved for someone who wanted details more than me. I posted it, set my phone face down, and poured bourbon into a glass the cabin provided. 5 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. I ignored it. 10 minutes. More buzzing. Text notifications stacking up like cordwood. I flipped it over. 17 missed calls, all Diane. I blocked her number, poured more bourbon, and watched the rest of the sunset in peace. By the second day, my phone had exploded. I'd unblocked Diane's number long enough to see 47 missed calls, then blocked it again. But the messages came through other channels. Facebook messages, emails, even a call from Pastor Crane, asking if everything was all right, if maybe I wanted to talk. Mrs. Hadley texted. Whole town's talking. Half pity you, half admire you. I'm in the second camp. I sent back a thumbs up and turned the phone off completely. The cabin had a small bookshelf with paperbacks left by previous guests. I picked one at random, a thriller about a man who disappeared into the wilderness to escape his life, and read by the fire while sleet tapped against the windows. The sound reminded me of the barn roof back home, the way winter rain turned to ice on metal. On the third day, I walked the pier in the morning cold, my boots echoing on the wood planks. A pair of loons called to each other across the water, their voices lonely and precise. I stood at the end watching my breath cloud, thinking about Gabe's words. What I could control. What I couldn't. I couldn't control Diane's choices. Couldn't make her love the land. Couldn't force her to see value in legacy over liquidity. But I could control my response. Could choose dignity over desperation. Could document what mattered and let the evidence speak. I pulled out my phone, turned it back on, long enough to take one more photo. Me at the end of the pier, lake behind me, morning light catching the steam from my coffee thermos. My wedding ring, visible on my left hand, the empty space beside me annotated by absence. I posted it with no caption, just the image. Then I sent one text to Diane's number before blocking it again. Loan papers need signing by Feb 28. Meet me at Lila's office or meet an attorney. I turned the phone off and spent the rest of the day in silence that felt like armor. The drive home on Monday was long and quiet. The radio played old country songs about heartbreak and whiskey, and I let them wash over me without really listening. The landscape rolled past, brown fields waiting for spring, farmhouses with smoke rising from chimneys, the same road I'd driven 1,000 times, but seeing it different now. When I pulled into the driveway, Diane's car was gone. The house stood empty, clean, exactly as I'd left it, except for a note on the kitchen counter. We need to talk. This isn't over. Don't make decisions when you're angry. I crumpled it, threw it in the trash, and walked to my desk. The loan papers sat there untouched. No signature, no note, nothing. I pulled out my phone, called the attorney whose number I'd saved weeks ago, made an appointment for Thursday, asked about asset protection, deed verification, and what it took to file for divorce in Iowa. He said he'd have paperwork ready. I hung up, sat in the quiet house, and listened to the furnace kick on. The sound was familiar, steady, honest. The house didn't lie, the land didn't manipulate. The tractor started when you turned the key. Or it didn't, but it never pretended. Through the window, I could see the barn, where Gabe would be tomorrow morning, rolling his cigarettes and working on whatever needed fixing. The fields beyond, waiting for spring. The Northeast 40, where my grandfather planted his first crop. All of it real, all of it mine. All of it worth fighting for. Diane had made her choice at Kyle's developer's mixer. I'd made mine at a cabin on a lake with an empty chair and a camera. Now we'd both live with the consequences. The cemetery was quiet that Wednesday, snow covering the ground in a thin white sheet that crunched under my boots. I hadn't been out here since Christmas, and guilt sat heavy in my chest as I walked past the familiar headstones toward the back corner where the Hollis plot waited. Claire's marker was simple gray granite, her name and dates carved clean. Beloved wife, loving mother to none, but mother to many. She'd been a teacher before the cancer took her. Spent 30 years shaping other people's children, since we couldn't have our own. I knelt in the snow, brushed it off the top of the stone. The cold marble bit through my gloves. I made a mess of things, I said to the silence. Wind moved through the bare oak branches overhead, creaking like old barn doors. Married too fast. Didn't wait long enough after you were gone. Just got lonely. And Diane was there, and she seemed, I don't know, alive in a way I wasn't anymore. A crow called from somewhere behind me. The sound echoed across the empty field of stones. She doesn't love what you loved. Doesn't see the land like you did. I traced Clara's name with one finger. Hell, I don't think she ever did. I just wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe I could start over, that you'd want that for me. The wind picked up, rattling the frozen branches. In the distance, a truck rumbled past on the county road, then silence returned like water filling a hole. I'm sorry I let someone who doesn't value what we built put her name on the deed. Lila thinks the signature's forged. I think she's right. I stood, my knees protesting the cold. Your niece is looking out for me. Thought you'd want to know that. I turned to go, then stopped. I'm filing for divorce. Thought I should tell you first. Feels like breaking a promise. But staying feels like breaking a bigger one. The one I made to you about protecting this place. I walked back to the truck, started it, let it warm while I sat watching the cemetery through the windshield. Clara would have told me to fight smart, not hard. To check the paperwork twice. To trust people like Lila, who'd earned it. I pulled out of the cemetery lot and drove straight to town. Lila's office door was closed when I arrived at the bank, but she waved me in when she saw me through the glass. Her desk was covered in files, a cup of tea going cold next to her computer. Wasn't expecting you today, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I need to know about that signature, the deed amendment. How wrong is it? She pulled the file without hesitation, like she'd been waiting for this conversation. Spread the document across the desk next to 3 other papers, loan applications I'd signed over the years, a deposit slip, a change of address form from when I'd married Diane. Look at the capital H in Hollis, she said, pointing with her pen. In your real signatures, you press harder on the downstroke. Makes it thicker. Here? She tapped the deed amendment. It's even pressure throughout, practiced but not natural. I leaned closer. She was right. My H had always been heavy at the bottom, a habit from learning cursive with a fountain pen in 3rd grade. This one was smooth, almost elegant. In the double L, she continued, you loop them tight together, barely any space. This has space. Like someone was being careful not to connect them wrong. That's not my signature. No, Lila said quietly. I don't believe it is. The office suddenly felt smaller. The smell of wood polish and old paper pressed in around me. Outside, someone laughed in the lobby, the sound foreign and jarring. What do I do with this? You could get a handwriting expert, document it officially. But that's time and money, and you've got a deadline in 6 weeks. She closed the file. Or you could use it as leverage. Make it clear you know, and you're not afraid to pursue it if she pushes. I'm not interested in leverage. I'm interested in the truth. The truth is expensive, Warren. She leaned back in her chair. But if you want it, I'll testify to what I see here. I've been processing your signatures for 20 years. I know your hand. That could cost you your job. Aunt Clara wouldn't forgive me if I didn't. She smiled, sad and certain. Some debts matter more than jobs. I sat there absorbing it. The forgery, Lila's willingness to help. The timeline collapsing toward April 15th like a rope pulling tight. There's something else, Lila said. She pulled up something on her computer, turned the screen toward me, a business filing. Kyle Brennan's LLC. I shouldn't be showing you this, but... She tapped the screen. He owes $1.2 million to various creditors. His last 3 development projects fell through. He needs your land to flip it, pay off his debts, stay solvent. So Diane's not just choosing him. She's choosing his desperation. Or she doesn't know. Could be he sold her a fantasy about retirement and security while his whole operation's drowning. Lila closed the window. Either way, this isn't about love. It's about money. And people do ugly things when money gets desperate. I stood, feeling older than my 67 years. Thank you for this, for all of it. Are you going to be okay? I'm going to be divorced and broke and fighting to keep what's mine. But yeah, I'll be okay. She walked me to the door, put a hand on my arm. Your anniversary trip? The one you took alone? She smiled. My daughter follows you on Facebook. Saw the photos. Half the church did. People are talking, but it's not all bad. Some folks are saying it's about time you stood up for yourself. And the other half? Think you're being cruel to a woman who just wants a better life. She shrugged. Can't please everyone. But the half that matters, they're watching to see what you do next. I walked out into the cold afternoon. The sky had cleared, pale blue and endless. My truck sat in the parking lot where I'd left it, faithful and simple, waiting to take me home. I sat behind the wheel and pulled out my phone. Searched for divorce attorneys in the county, found one with good reviews and an office in town, made an appointment for tomorrow morning. Then I called Gabe. You busy? I asked when he picked up. Never too busy. What do you need? Might need a witness. Someone to help me document what I own and what I'm taking when I move out. Silence on the line. Then, moving out of your own house? Preemptive. If she won't sign and won't leave, I need leverage. Clean inventory of what's mine, what's hers, what we bought together. I'll be there Saturday morning. Bring a camera and a notebook. Thanks, Gabe. Don't thank me yet. This is gonna hurt before it gets better. It's already hurting. Then I guess it can't get much worse. He paused. You doing the right thing, Warren. Hard thing and the right thing usually look the same. I hung up, sat in the truck watching people come and go from the bank. Normal people with normal problems. Deposits and withdrawals and loan payments. Simple transactions that didn't require lawyers or handwriting experts or choosing between land and loneliness. The cold seeped through the door seals, but I didn't start the engine yet. Just sat there doing the math. In my head. What it would cost to fight. What it would cost to fold. What it would cost to do nothing. All of it expensive. None of it cheap. But only one price I could actually afford to pay. Pastor Elliot Crane called on Thursday evening while I was making dinner. I almost didn't answer. His number showing up usually meant someone had died or someone needed intervention, but I picked up on the 4th ring. Warren, got a minute? His voice was careful, the tone he used when navigating delicate ground. Sure, Pastor. Had coffee with Diane this morning. She asked to talk. He paused, and I heard him take a breath. She's hurting, Warren. Says you abandoned her on your anniversary, left her alone, while you went on a vacation by yourself to punish her. I set down the spatula, turned off the stove. That what she said? She said she's been trying to help you see options for the farm. That Kyle Brennan has a legitimate offer that could set you both up for retirement. But you won't even consider it? Won't have a conversation about your future together? Did she mention why I booked that cabin? She said you did it without asking her schedule first. That you knew she had commitments that weekend. I walked to the window, looked out at the barn, silhouetted against the sunset. Pastor, did she tell you about the hotel receipt I found? The meetings with Kyle that she didn't mention? The loan. Papers she won't sign unless I sell my grandfather's land? Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. She didn't mention those details, he said finally. No, I imagine she didn't. I kept my voice level, calm. She told you I'm cruel and controlling, that I abandoned her. What she didn't tell you is that I invited her to come. Begged her, actually. She chose Kyle's developer's mixer instead. Warren, ask her about the deed, Pastor. Ask her when I signed the amendment that put her name on the title. Ask her to show you the paperwork. Then ask her why I don't remember signing it. I don't want to get in the middle of, you're already in the middle. She put you there. I watched the sun drop below the horizon, the sky bleeding orange into purple. I'm not asking you to take sides. I'm asking you to ask questions, real ones, before you decide who's being cruel. He was quiet for a long moment. You're right. That's fair. I'll talk to her again. And Pastor, marriage is sacred. I know that. But so is truth. So is honoring the dead by protecting what they built. I turned away from the window. My grandfather cleared that land with a mule and a plow. My father kept it through the drought in '88. I'm not selling it, so Diane can have a condo in Florida and Kyle can pay off his creditors. His creditors? Ask Lila at the bank. Kyle's drowning. He needs this deal to survive. And Diane either doesn't know or doesn't care. Pastor Crane exhaled slowly. Warren, I'm sorry. I should have asked more questions before calling. You were trying to help. I appreciate that. But help her by making sure she knows what she's actually choosing, not just what Kyle's promising. And we hung up. I stood in the kitchen, listening to the house settle around me, the familiar creaks and groans of a place that had sheltered 3 generations. The refrigerator hummed. The furnace kicked on. Honest sounds from honest things. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. This is Diane, using Pastor's phone since you blocked me. We need to talk. You're making this uglier than it has to be. I deleted it without responding. Friday morning, I met with the attorney in his office above the hardware store downtown. Tom Yates, 60-something, with the tired eyes of a man who'd seen every variation of human failure. His office smelled like old coffee and leather, law books lining the walls floor to ceiling. He spread my documents across his desk. The deed amendment, the hotel receipts, the loan papers, the Valentine's photos. This is straightforward, he said after reviewing everything. Forgery on the deed gives you grounds? Her refusal to sign the loan papers could be considered financial coercion. The affair, if you can prove it, is icing. How much will this cost? Depends on whether she fights. If she agrees to mediation, maybe $5,000. If she lawyers up and drags it out. He shrugged. 20, 30,000, maybe more. The number hit like a fist to the chest. That's a year's profit off the farm. Divorce is expensive. That's why most people stay miserable. He leaned back in his chair. But you've got leverage. The forged signature is serious. If she contests the divorce, you file fraud charges. Most people don't want that kind of attention. What about the refinancing? I need both signatures by April 15th or the rate jumps. You might be able to refinance in your name, only if you put down 40%. Banks don't like it, but with your credit and the forgery issue, Lila could push it through. Call it a hardship refi. 40% is $68,000. You got it? If I liquidate everything, sell some equipment, maybe, and I thought about the tractor in the barn, my father's 1952 John Deere, fully restored, worth maybe $15,000, $18,000 to the right buyer? Yeah, I've got it. Then that's your path. File for divorce, document the forgery, refinance solo, clean break. She gets whatever the court says is fair from the marital assets, but the land stays yours. He started drafting paperwork while I sat there calculating what it would cost. Equipment I'd need. Pride I'd swallow. The tractor that represented 30 years of weekend restoration, every bolt turned with my father before he died, then alone after. The land or the tractor. Legacy or sentiment. Not really a choice at all. That afternoon, Lila called. I shouldn't be telling you this, she said without preamble, but Kyle Brennan came in this morning trying to open a business account. He's shopping for new banking because his current lender cut him off. How bad is it? He's got maybe 60 days before his creditors force liquidation. The land deal with you? That's not retirement planning. That's a Hail Mary to avoid bankruptcy. I sat down at the kitchen table. Outside, sleet tapped against the windows. February trying to decide between winter and spring. Does Diane know? I doubt it. Men like Kyle don't advertise desperation. They advertise opportunity. And she paused. Warren, if he's pushing this hard, he might try something stupid. Pressure Diane. Forge documents himself. I've seen it before, when people get desperate. What do? Document everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every paper. Get that handwriting analysis if you can afford it. And maybe, she hesitated, maybe make sure you've got copies of everything important somewhere Diane can't access, just in case. You think she'd destroy evidence? I think desperate people make desperate choices. And if Kyle's whispering in her ear about splitting assets, about how much your farm is worth, about how unfair it is that it's in your name. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. After we hung up, I went to my office and started scanning documents. The original deed, my father's will, the mortgage paperwork, tax returns going back 10 years, everything that proved what was mine before Diane, what I'd built, what I'd protected. I saved it all to a thumb drive, made 2 copies, gave one to Gabe that evening when he stopped by to check on the cattle. "What's this?" he asked, turning the small drive over in his calloused hand. "Insurance. If something happens to the house, if papers go missing, that's everything that matters." He pocketed it without another word. "You doing okay?" "No, but I'm doing what needs doing. That's all any of us can do." He rolled a cigarette, lit it, and we stood on the porch watching the sleet turn to snow. "This gonna get uglier before it's done?" "Probably. You need anything, you call. Don't care what time." I know." He crushed out the cigarette, clapped my shoulder once, and drove off into the darkening evening, his truck's taillights fading into the snow. I stood there until the cold drove me inside, until my hands were numb and my face ached. Stood there like a man at a border, looking back at what was and forward at what had to be. The land remembered who loved it. Now it was time to prove I was one of them. Saturday morning came with false spring, temperatures climbing into the 40s, snow melting into mud, the kind of weather that made you believe winter might actually end. I was in the barn oiling the planter chains when I heard voices outside. Diane's voice. And Gabe's. I set down the oil can, moved to the door. They stood by Gabe's truck, her arms crossed tight, his stance wide and solid, like a man who'd decided something and wouldn't be moved. Not your business," Diane was saying, her voice sharp with anger. "It's been my business for 23 years. Gabe's voice was low, steady. "Been working this land since before you showed up. I'll be here after you're gone." "You work for Warren?" "Not, I work with Warren. There's a difference." He pulled out his tobacco, started rolling a cigarette with those deliberate hands. "And I've watched what you're doing to him. Watched him turn gray this winter. Watched him eat less, sleep less, walk around his own house like a stranger. He's stubborn. Won't even discuss options." "You mean, won't sell his family's land to your boyfriend so you two can run off to Florida?" He lit the cigarette, took a drag. "I've seen this before, Mrs. Hollis. Woman gets tired of farm life, decides she wants something shinier, usually ends with a man losing everything he worked for." Diane's face flushed red. "You don't know anything about what I want? I know you're killing him slower than winter kills calves." He pointed the cigarette at her. "And I know you forged his signature on that deed." Lila showed him. "So did I, when he asked my opinion. I've watched Warren sign his name 1,000 times. That wasn't his hand." "That's a lie." "You calling Lila Morgan a liar? Woman who's processed his loans for 20 years, who's got every signature he's ever made in her files?" Gabe shook his head. "No, you're just hoping he won't fight, that he'll be too proud, or too tired, or too in love to call you out." I stepped into the doorway. Diane saw me, her face going white. "How long have you been standing there?" she asked. "Long enough." I walked toward them, boots squelching in the mud. The smell of thawing earth was thick, mixed with the sweetness of warming manure from the cattle lot. "Gabe's right, about the signature, about all of it. Warren, I can explain." "Don't." I held up a hand. "Just don't. I've heard enough explanations. Enough about Kyle's opportunities and Florida dreams and how I only know dirt." She reached for me. I stepped back. "I never meant to hurt you," she said, and her voice cracked. Real tears in her eyes. I want more than this. More than frozen fields and broken equipment and neighbors who've known you since kindergarten. Kyle says we could have a real life. Travel, comfort, security." "Kyle's bankrupt," I said. "He owes over $1 million. His LLC is 90 days from liquidation. That land deal, he needs it to survive. He's not offering you security. He's offering you whatever lie keeps you on his side." She blinked. "That's not..." He said the development was funded, that investors were... Lila pulled his banking records. "He's drowning." I kept my voice flat, factual. "And you either knew and didn't care, or you didn't know because you were too busy believing what you wanted to hear." She looked between me and Gabe, something breaking in her face. "He said we'd be partners, that he values what I bring, my planning experience, my connections. He values your husband's land," Gabe said quietly. "That's all. You're just the door he's using to get to it." Diane's shoulders sagged. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself. I never loved this place like you do. Like Clara did. I tried, Warren. I really tried. But every day here feels like I'm living in someone else's life. Someone else's dream. Then you should have said that 8 years ago, I said. Before you forged my signature. Before you met your ex behind my back. Before you made me choose between my marriage and my land. I didn't mean for it to go this far. But it did. I pulled the envelope from my coat pocket, the one the attorney had prepared. These are divorce papers. You can sign them now, agree to mediation, and we'll split the marital assets fairly, or you can fight, and I'll file fraud charges over the deed. Your choice. She stared at the envelope like it might bite. You're really doing this. You already did it. I'm just finishing what you started. She took the envelope with shaking hands. What about the farm? The refinancing? I'll handle it, alone. I stepped back, putting distance between us. You've got 2 weeks to move out. Take what's yours. I'll have Gabe witness an inventory so there's no disputes. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Kyle's place, your sister's, a hotel. That's not my problem anymore. The words came out harder than I meant, but I didn't soften them. You wanted a different life. Go live it. She stood there holding the envelope, tears running down her face. Not the delicate crying she used to do when she wanted something. Real, ugly crying. The kind that came from recognizing a mistake too late to fix. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know. And I did. I could see it in her face, hear it in her voice. She was sorry. Sorry it ended this way. Sorry she got caught. Sorry Kyle turned out to be desperate instead of successful. But not sorry enough to have made different choices when they mattered. She walked to her car, got in, and drove away, gravel spitting under her tires. Gabe and I stood in the mud, watching the dust settle. That was hard, he said finally. Yeah. You okay? No, but I will be. I turned back toward the barn. Help me finish the planter? Sure. He crushed out his cigarette. Warren? Yeah? You did the right thing. Did I? Because it feels like I just lost 8 years and came out with nothing. You came out with your land, your dignity, your self-respect. He followed me into the barn. Some men lose all three and still don't get free. You got out before you lost what really mattered. We worked in silence after that. The only sounds, the clink of tools and the drip of melting snow from the roof. Outside, a robin called, first one I'd heard this year. The sound of spring coming, whether we were ready or not. That afternoon, I drove to town and met with Dale Hutchins, the auctioneer. His office smelled like cigar smoke and old wood, walls covered with photos of farm sales going back 40 years. What can I do for you, Warren? He asked, gesturing to a chair. I pulled the title from my pocket, the one I'd been carrying for 3 days, debating. I need to sell my father's tractor, the '52 John Deere. Restored. Runs perfect. Dale's eyebrows went up. That's a collector's piece. You've been working on that since he died, 30 years. I set the title on his desk. I need the money for the farm refinancing, 40% down. It's this or lose the land. I bet, Warren, there's got to be another way. There's not. List it for April 10th. Get the best price you can. And he picked up the title, studied it. This is going to hurt. Everything hurts right now. Might as well make it count for something. He nodded slowly, made a note in his calendar. I'll put the word out. Might get some collectors interested. Could go for 15, maybe 18,000 if we're lucky. Whatever it brings. Just make sure it goes to someone who'll take care of it. I'll do my best. I walked out into the afternoon sun, feeling lighter and heavier at the same time. The tractor for the land. 30 years of Saturdays. In the barn, every bolt turned with care, every part sourced and fitted and tested. But it was just a machine. The land was legacy. By the time I got home, the auction flyer was already posted at the feed store. I saw it when I stopped for grain, a photo of the tractor, gleaming red and green, the restoration job that had won me a blue ribbon at the county fair in 2015. Mrs. Hadley was there, saw me looking at it. She didn't say anything, just left me a voicemail later that night. Warren, don't. That tractor's your father. I didn't call back. There was nothing to say. The land remembered who loved it. I was proving I was one of them. The auction was set for April 10th, a Saturday morning with temperatures finally climbing into the 60s. Spring had arrived in earnest. Robins singing from the barn rafters. First green shoots breaking through the mud in the Northeast 40, the air smelling like earth and possibility instead of ice and diesel. I arrived early, parked away from the crowd already gathering. The tractor sat on the auction block like a piece of my history-made metal. Every surface gleaming, engine idling smooth, the restoration work visible in every detail. Dale had positioned it perfectly, morning light catching the chrome and fresh paint. Gabe was there, leaning against his truck, rolling a cigarette. He nodded when he saw me but didn't come over, giving me space. The crowd was bigger than I expected. Farmers I'd known for decades. Collectors from 3 counties over. And standing near this front, arms crossed and confident, was Kyle Brennan. He wore pressed khakis and a polo shirt, leather loafers already muddy from the lot. A man dressed for golf, not farming. When he saw me, he smiled. The kind of smile that said he thought he'd already won. I stayed by my truck, watching. Dale climbed onto the platform, microphone in hand. "Morning, folks. We've got a real piece of history here. 1952 John Deere Model A. Full restoration by Warren Hollis over 30 years. Runs like new. Let's start the bidding at $8,000. Hands went up. The price climbed quick, 9, 10, 12,000. Collectors calling out numbers. Dale's voice rising with the bids. Kyle raised his paddle at 14,000. The crowd quieted some. People knew who he was, what he represented. A few heads turned toward me, checking my reaction. 14,000, Dale called. Do I hear 15? An older man in the back, collector I didn't know, went 15. Kyle countered at 16 without hesitation. The collector shook his head, dropped out. 16,000, Dale said. Going once. 17. Gabe's voice calm and clear, every head turned. Gabe stood there with his paddle raised, face neutral, that same expression he wore when fixing machinery or making decisions. The expression that said he'd thought this through and wouldn't be moved. Kyle's smile faltered. He looked at Gabe, then at me, calculating. 17.5. 18,000, Gabe said without pause. The crowd murmured. 18,000 was serious money. More than the tractor was worth to most people. More than Gabe should have had. A farmhand's wages didn't stretch that far. Kyle's jaw tightened. He looked at his paddle, at the tractor, at the crowd watching, his face flushed red. This is ridiculous. It's not even worth 18,000, Dale interrupted. Going once, going twice. And he paused, gave Kyle one last chance. Kyle threw his paddle on the ground and stormed toward his car, mud spattering his loafers. Sold. Dale brought the gavel down. To Gabe Thornton for $18,000. The crowd applauded. Not the polite golf claps you usually get at auctions, but real appreciation. They knew what they'd just witnessed, knew what it meant. Gabe walked to the platform, pulled out a checkbook, actual paper checks, the kind nobody used anymore, and wrote out the amount with hands that shook just slightly. Dale took it, shook his hand, and Gabe walked toward the tractor. I met him there. Gabe, that's your life savings. Your retirement. Probably. He pulled the keys from his pocket, the ones Dale had just handed him, held them out to me. But I don't need a tractor. You do. I can't. You taught me how to fix engines when I came back from Vietnam and couldn't hold down a job. Gave me work when the VA checks ran dry, and my hands shook too bad for factory work. He pressed the keys into my palm. You taught me to trust men again after that war taught me not to. This is the least I can do. My throat closed up. I couldn't speak. Besides, Gabe said, climbing into the driver's seat, starting the engine, somebody's got to make sure this thing gets home safe. And I don't think you can drive and cry at the same time. And then he drove it off the platform and toward my truck, engine rumbling smooth, and I stood there holding the keys he'd given back to me, watching my father's tractor, our tractor now, mine and Gabe's, roll past the crowd that clapped and nodded and understood exactly what had just happened. Mrs. Hadley walked up, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. That's the finest thing I've seen in 40 years. Lila was there too, smiling. Aunt Clara would have loved this. I couldn't speak yet, just nodded and followed Gabe home. Monday morning, I sat in Lila's office with the auction check. $18,000 from Gabe, which I'd deposit and pay back over time, plus my own savings scraped together over the winter. $68,000 total, 40% of the loan value. This is everything, I told her, sliding the papers across the desk. She reviewed the numbers, typed into her computer. The office was quiet, except for the keyboard clicks and the distant sound of the lobby's coffee maker, gurgling. With the forgery documented and your equity stake, I can push this through as a hardship refinance. Your name only. Diane's signature removed from all documents. She looked up. This makes you solely responsible for the debt. You understand that? I understand. And if something happens, medical emergency, crop failure, you don't have a cosigner to fall back on. I'll manage. She printed the forms, slid them across. Sign here, here, and here. I signed. My real signature, heavy on the downstrokes. Loops tight together. My handwriting. My land. My debt. My choice. Congratulations, Lila said. You just bought your freedom. Feels more like I just mortgaged it. Maybe, but it's your mortgage now. Not hers, not Kyle's, yours. She stood, came around the desk, and hugged me. Brief and professional, but real. Aunt Clara would be proud. And from there, I drove to the attorney's office. Tom Yates had the final divorce papers ready, mediation complete, Diane had signed everything 2 weeks ago, without contest, moved to an apartment in Cedar Rapids, taken her clothes and personal items and nothing else. She didn't fight, Tom said, handing me the decree. Honestly thought she would. I think she knew she'd already lost. And I looked at the papers, the official seal, the judge's signature, or maybe Kyle disappeared when she couldn't deliver the land. Either way, you're done. Legally single as of today. I drove home with the papers on the passenger seat, listening to the radio play old country songs about starting over. The fields rolled past, greening up with spring wheat, the land responding to warmth and rain and care. When I pulled into the driveway, Gabe was in the barn, working on the planter. The 52 John Deere sat in its usual spot, right where my father used to park it after every use, right where it belonged. I grabbed the divorce papers and the refinancing documents, walked to my office, and filed them in this cabinet under closed accounts. Then I changed into work clothes and joined Gabe in the barn. "We ready to plant?" I asked. "Been ready, just waiting on you." We worked the rest of the day, preparing the equipment, checking seed, mapping out the fields. Tomorrow we'd start planting, corn in the northeast 40, soybeans in the back 80 that Kyle Brennan had wanted so badly. As the sun set, painting the sky orange and pink, Gabe and I stood on the porch with cold beers, watching the land settle into evening. A meadowlark called from the fence line, clear and perfect. "You sleep better now?" Gabe asked. "Yeah, first time in months." "Good." He took a sip of beer. Because planting season's gonna kick your ass." I laughed. The first real laugh since December. Wouldn't have it any other way. A car turned into the driveway. I tensed, but it was just the mail carrier running late. She waved, dropped something in the box, and drove on. I walked out to check it. Inside was a postcard from Diane, no return address, just a picture of a beach and 2 sentences on the back. "I'm sorry it ended this way. I hope you find what you're looking for." I stood there holding it, feeling nothing much, no anger, no grief, just a kind of distant recognition that we'd both made choices and now we'd both live with them. I dropped the postcard in the recycling bin on the way back to the porch. "Everything okay?" Gabe asked. "Everything's fine," I said. And it was. The planting started the next morning at dawn, the air still cool but promising warmth. I climbed onto the 52 John Deere, felt the engine rumble to life under my hands. The same rumble my father had felt, the same vibration that had traveled through 3 generations of Hollis men. Gabe rode shotgun on the planter, monitoring the seed drop, making adjustments. We worked to the northeast 41st, the field my grandfather had cleared with a mule team in 1947. The soil was perfect, dark and rich, smelling like everything that grows. By mid-morning, Mrs. Hadley's car pulled up at the edge of the field. She got out with a basket, waved us over. When we stopped at the turn row, she handed up a thermos of coffee and a pie wrapped in foil. "Apple," she said. "Figured you boys could use some fuel." "You didn't have to do this," I said. "I know, but half the church is talking about what Gabe did at that auction, and the other half is talking about how you stood your ground. Figured somebody should bring pie." She smiled. "That's what we do for people who choose right over easy." As Lila's car appeared next, pulling up beside Mrs. Hadley's. She got out with a thermos of her own. "Sweet tea," she said, because the day was getting warm. She stood there watching us plant for a while, not saying much, just being present. Pastor Crane came by around noon in his old pickup, parked at the field edge, and walked out to where we'd stopped to refuel. He shook my hand, then Gabe's. "Heard you refinanced," he said. "Got it done in time." "Just barely." "And Diane?" "Gone. Cedar Rapids. Filed the papers last week." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry it came to that, but I'm glad you didn't lose what mattered." "Me too." "She called me," he said, "few days ago. Said she made mistakes, said Kyle turned out to be—" He paused, searching for words. "Not what he promised." "They usually aren't." "She wanted me to ask if you'd consider talking, maybe reconciling." I looked at the field, half planted, the rows straight and clean. "No, that door's closed." I told her I thought that's what you'd say." He clapped my shoulder. "But I had to ask. For her sake, not yours." "I understand. You doing okay? Really?" I thought about it. The divorce. The debt. The tractor I'd almost lost and got back. The land that stayed mine. The friends standing in my field bearing witness. "Yeah," I said. "I'm doing okay." As he left and we went back to planting. By evening, the Northeast 40 was finished, the seed in the ground, the future planted in rows that stretched toward the horizon. Gabe and I stood by the barn watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. "You hear about Kyle?" Gabe asked, rolling a cigarette. "No." "What happened?" "His LLC filed bankruptcy last week. Creditors seized everything. He left town. Someone saw him at a bus station heading east." "And Diane?" "No idea. She's your ex-wife. Not my problem. He lit the cigarette, took a drag. You gonna be all right running this place solo? Figured I'd ask you to stay on, if you want. As what, employee or partner? I looked at him. What do you want to be? He smiled, rare and genuine. Let's start with friend and see where it goes. Deal. And we shook on it, his hand rough and calloused from 40 years of work, mine the same. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of bourbon and my father's field notebook. I opened it to the first blank page and wrote the date, April 12th, 2025, and the weather, clear, 68 degrees, southwest wind. Then I wrote, planted northeast 40, corn, Gabe helped, good stand. Tractor ran perfect. Simple words, the kind my father wrote, the kind his father wrote before him. The land remembers. I thought about the winter that had passed. The hotel receipt in December, the cabin in February, the auction in April, all of it leading to this moment, sitting on my own porch, on my own land, with my own future stretching out like planted rows. Diane wanted Florida and Kyle wanted money, and they both got what they chased. Nothing solid, nothing lasting. I wanted the land. And I got it. A truck rumbled up the driveway. Gabe, coming back from town with supplies for tomorrow. He parked, climbed out, held up a bag from the hardware store. Got those planter parts. We can swap them out before we start the back 80. Sounds good. He walked up the porch steps, sat in the chair Diane used to occupy. It didn't feel wrong. It felt like the natural order reasserting itself. You know what I was thinking? He said. What's that? That tractor auction. All those people who showed up, they didn't come for the machinery. They came to see what you'd do, see if you'd fold or fight. And you fought, quietly, with receipts and photographs and paperwork instead of fists and shouting. But you fought. He pulled out his whittling stick, the one he'd been working on for months. It was finished now, a small whistle, smooth and perfect. He handed it to me, for when you need to call the dog home. I turned it over in my hands. I don't have a dog. Not yet. But you will. Man can't live alone forever, I smiled. One thing at a time. Fair enough. We sat there. The stars came out, bright and clear in the spring sky. The land stretched dark around us, patient and waiting, ready for whatever came next. Inside the house, the refinancing papers sat filed and finished. The divorce decree, sealed and stored. The hotel receipt and the forged signature and all the evidence of winter's battles tucked away in folders, labeled closed. The future was planted, spring had come, and I was finally fully home. The land remembers who loved it. And now I'd made sure it would remember me. 3 weeks later, I sat on the porch at dawn with my coffee. The rain gauge showed 2 inches from last night's storm. Good for the seedlings. I opened my father's field notebook, wrote the date, the weather, the first report of growth in the Northeast 40, continuing the work, keeping the record. The daffodils I'd planted on Clara's grave were blooming now, yellow and bright against the gray stone. Lila had been there yesterday, left fresh flowers. She'd started stopping by the farm on Saturdays, helping with paperwork, teaching me how to use the computer for crop reports. Said maybe she'd look at early retirement, do some consulting, keep busy. We'd see. Kyle's dealership properties sold at auction 2 weeks back. Some developer from Iowa City bought the lots, paid pennies on the dollar. The town barely noticed. Men like Kyle come and go, leaving nothing but debt and broken promises. Diane forwarded a new address last week. Somewhere in Kansas, a secretary job at a municipal planning office. The envelope had no note, just the address update for legal purposes. I filed it and forgot it. The land remembers who loved it and who tried to sell it. My grandfather was right about that, right about checking the paperwork, about precision, about protecting what matters. They thought silence was surrender. Turned out it was just preparation. From the barn, I heard Gabe's voice, talking to the cattle, that low, steady murmur he used when moving them. He'd set up a small trailer out back, said the commute from town was wearing on him, said maybe farming and friendship weren't so different, both about building something that lasts, both about understanding what you're standing on. The sun cleared the tree line, warming the porch boards. The field stretched green toward the horizon. My father's field notebook sat beside me, pages filled with 3 generations of weather and dates and simple truths. Gabe wanted to add his notes someday, if I didn't mind. Pass it forward, keep the record. Some battles you win with noise. This one I won with receipts, a camera, and patience. But the real victory wasn't in the winning. It was in the planting, in the staying, in the morning coffee, and the rain gauge, and the field notebook that would outlast us all. The land remembers, and now so would I.